Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are continuing with part numero tres. Fuck. I was gonna say the intro in Spanish and I've got no idea why, but I just fucking ruined that intro. But anyways, we're not stopping this recording. Let's carry on. This is part 3 of the Flood Lore miniseries. Today we are looking at the pure forms. So the pure forms are radically different to any other type of damage-dealing flood form, notably the combat forms, because they don't require the infection of a sentient host to be formed. So instead of being like 70% flood and 30% host species, pure forms are 100% flood biomass, hence why they're called pure forms. They're comprised purely of converted biomass. So for pure forms to actually exist, the flood have to be in the coordinated stage of the outbreak, and therefore they must have a full established Gravemind. Now this normally happens when the flood run out of local hosts to infect, so they run out of bodies of humans or elites or brutes for example, and this happens mostly because they've already all been infected, so they have to use the combination of what they have along with the newly formed central intelligence in the form of the Gravemind to start creating more units for battle. The way the pure forms that we know of at least are formed begins with the infection of a sentient host, like a human or an elite. Their non-infected tissue is converted into flood supercells, which then get attached to a restructured framework of bone that's been heavily modified to fit the flood's purpose. Honestly, not all that much is known about the pure forms and their various different forms they can take. Obviously, the 3 most well-known ones are Stalker, Ranged and Tank forms, as they were the only 3 present in the most recent flood outbreak, which happened during the Human Covenant War. However, before we cover these 3 important forms, we're first going to look at an ancient, mythical creature, hidden deep within the source code of Halo 2, yet to see the light of day some 13 years later. A creature rumoured to be the precursor to Halo 3 pure forms, only viewable by modding and model replacing. This creature is the Flood Juggernaut. Now, we still don't know if the Flood Juggernaut specifically is canon. I'm going to cover it in more detail in a video next week, but considering that it laid the groundwork for the pure forms in Halo 3, I thought that it was kind of worth covering just a little bit today. So, the Juggernauts were supposedly going to act sort of like a local Gravemind, in that they were a local form of intelligence that controlled nearby combat forms. So it was also going to act as a mini-boss, with only one appearing at once, and when that Juggernaut was killed, all nearby combat forms would just die, because they had nothing controlling them. But the weird thing is, they did. They had the combat forms inside them, and also the Gravemind controlling them, so I'd imagine that these contradictions are just one of the many reasons that the Juggernaut was cut from Halo 2. However, we do have quite a bright glimmer of hope that the Juggernaut could maybe be canon. In the gameplay that we've seen of Terminus Firefight, which is the Flood Firefight mode coming to Halo Wars 2 with Awakening the Nightmare, we fight a Flood tank form called the Flood Abomination, which very clearly is heavily inspired by the Juggernaut. Now this thing is crazy strong and takes a lot of firepower to take it down. It also has large tentacles and a much bigger upper body than the original Juggernaut 2, which is why it's likely even stronger. Now sadly, it's unknown as of now if it's supposed to be a canonical representation of the actual Juggernaut that we all know from Halo 2, just with a different name, or if it's just an entirely new form that just happens to be heavily inspired by it. Either way, I'm hoping for the former. I'd love it if 343 took something so mythical and actually made it into a really fleshed out canonical thing. It's one of those things that you never expect to happen, but you always want it to happen. Alrighty then, let's move on to the pure forms that we actually know information about and that are canon, beginning with the Stalker form. So as with all pure forms, the Stalker is comprised of flood biomass and modified bones. These pesky little buggers are thin, stealthy and agile, which combined with their powerful hind legs allows them to leap massive distances and even crawl on walls. Their main method of attack are two bladed front limbs, and they've been known to occasionally charge at an enemy, trying to use their speed to their advantage and knock them down, but these forms don't really tend to waste time attacking. Instead, they tend to stay out of combat and focus on getting themselves into strategic and well-placed positions before then mutating into one of the other pure forms. This is where their agility really comes into play. They're able to dodge shots and projectiles really easily and long enough to morph into a truly deadly foe. When positioned correctly, the Stalker is then able to completely rearrange its body and limbs, somehow even gaining biomass, and transform into one of the two known pure forms, the ranged form or the tank form. The ranged form is used for, take a wild guess in the dark, ranged attacks. Usually seen mounted in an elevated position on like walls or ceilings. This form has 3 legs, which make it into sort of like a tripod that has really good stability when firing, however, it's not able to move. The abdomen of the Stalker transforms into a piece of biomass that sticks up and fires spikes, which are comprised of bone and biomatter, really fast at really high velocities at the enemy. Somehow, these spikes are able to infinitely regenerate, which means that ranged forms can never run out of ammo. Now, I've got no idea how they managed to do that, so as for now, I'm just gonna run with space magic. When the ranged form comes under attack, it can curl this spike platform down, which covers and protects its face. When they're in this form, they're basically a sitting duck, but at the same time, they're a sitting duck that takes like 10 times the amount of rounds to kill, so I don't know, pick your poison. Along with the Stalker form, the ranged form is also able to transform into a tank, which serves the almost opposite purpose. This strong-ass hunk of biomass is what Stalkers and Rangers transform into when the enemy is too close or when they're faced with a really heavily armed opponent. The tank has massive forearms comprised of the front limbs of the Stalker and very short stubby legs that actually look quite comical when it runs, which are comprised of the Stalker's hind legs. The forearms are much bulkier and have blades made of protruding pieces of bone that can deliver a devastating crush attack, while also being used to shield their face from incoming fire and therefore protect their weak spot. This close quarters strength and overall bulkiness does come at the detriment of speed, however. Although they can use their forearms to run fairly fast on all fours, the tank is overall very slow and it hobbles towards its opponent quite ominously. They're also capable of spitting infection forms out of their face, which to be honest I've only ever seen them do a few times, and I think it's a pretty rare occurrence, but it's certainly quite a disturbing occurrence. So that's all for the pure forms. In the next video we're going to cover all the different types of Gravemind, and then because you guys are absolutely smashing these videos, the reception has been insurmountable, I'm going to cover something that a lot of you have asked and something I'm honestly quite interested in making a video about. All of the cut flood forms. That's right, every single flood form that Bungie cut from Halo 1, 2 and 3, we're going to be looking at them all in a single video. So, thanks a lot for watching guys, I really appreciate it, and I'll catch you in the next one.